Welcome back everyone to the Hello World Guy. This is another episode of the C programming series. In this video we are going to add a very important functionality in our program, which is that currently if I go under functions.c, you can see that we are essentially just setting the ID to 0 when we are adding a new account, but this is not the way we want to do it. Instead, what we want to do is we want to set the ID to whatever the next ID is actually supposed to be. So what in order to do that, we will have to actually read all of the accounts and then obtain the maximum ID and then do an ID greater than that ID. So we'll go through each of the accounts, get the ID that is the highest number, and then we will take that ID and set the ID of this account to be one ID greater than the previous largest ID. So for that we will have to actually read the file first and then write the data. What we will do is we will create a file pointer fp and open the file like we know how to do in read binary mode. And let me actually move this up here, and in here we are going to while we don't get EOF, we are going to read the account and we are just going to read in the account variable, and by default we are going to set the account.id is equal to 0, and let's actually create an if statement which checks if the account.id is less than the account that we loaded, but that's in the we need to store that in a separate variable. So we'll create another account called temporary account, and we will check if that ID if this ID is less than that. If it is, then we will set account.id to temp account.id plus 1, and this should essentially get the correct ID, and we are going to remove that from here, and we are also going to make it so that we set fp here directly because we have already defined it, so we just need to reset it. And of course we want to make sure that we actually close the file using that, or else it will remain open and that won't be very nice. So that should actually do what we need it to do. It should get the correct ID and do that. So now it's time to test our program. We actually test this, two very important things that we actually need to check, make sure that the file pointer actually exists. So if it does not exist, actually if it exists, only then we are going to say if fp, which means if it's not null, then we are going to go and do all of this, else we will just not do that, and the ID will remain 0, which means this is the first ID. And we also need to make sure that in the read all function we don't do it without. So in here we also need to check if not fp. So, but if it is not valid in this case, we don't need to do anything, but instead just return, because we can just assume that means that no accounts exist, and we should likely not give an error in this situation. So let's go ahead and run the actual make file, and what you should see is that it does that. And let's add a new account and enter the account name. You can enter whatever you want, and enter initial deposit, let's say 50, and let's add another account and let's call it Tom, and let's say an initial deposit of 80. And now let's go ahead and read all accounts, and what you should see is that actually Tom's ID still stayed 0. Now the reason it did that was because there is actually an error in the way we are doing this. We need to check if it is less than or equal, and not if it is just less than. So let's go and run it again, and I'm not so sure if you can actually see my screen though, so let me just clear my terminal first because it's out of that. And now let's run this, and if I go ahead and actually we'll have to quit, and let's first delete the accounts.dat file so that we can start off fresh because it contains duplicate IDs. So now let's go ahead and run this, and let's add a new account, John, with let's just say 90, and then add another account with Tom with, let's say, 80. And now if I read all accounts, you can see that John has 0 while Tom has 1, and if we were to add more accounts, they would have correct IDs. So with that, now we can actually in the next video start implementing functionalities that require specific accounts like withdrawing, balance, and depositing and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you in the next one. Make sure to like and subscribe as well, and bye.